All right, let me start off with this. Down goes Ole Miss.
What
Down
game?
goes the Rebels.
You're saying Tulane?
What if Tulane beats the Ole Miss Rebels after beating USC?
I said this months ago, and you dismissed me. You are
They're
the
not beating Ole Miss.
worst.
They're not beating.
Okay,
So look,
good.
I'm not picking Ole Miss to lose, but what if they did it?
I think they could have beaten them last year. I don't think that they beat them this year
I don't think
because
they beat them this year either.
I really like Michael Pratt. They've got some really good football players. They've got a really good coaching staff. But Ole Miss has gotten better. Like Ole Miss is improving. Ole Miss is one of the top teams in the SEC, and they're a top 5 team in the SEC right now for me.
They're a middle tier team in the SEC.
Still, that's an uphill battle to look. The thing is, though, is Troy put up a pretty good fight against Ole Miss last year, and Tulane's better than Troy. If someone could do it, and there's a really weird random G5 upset, this is the one.
Troy is the university that's always on the brink of upsetting a Power 5 opponent.
But they never do it.
So look, I'm kind of joking with the Tulane and Ole Miss. I think Georgia's going down in the regular season. I really do believe that. I don't think that they're going to go undefeated again. I don't think that they go 2 straight years, really, and let's call it what it is. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, in 2021, they also did not lose a regular season game. So this would be 3 straight seasons where they did not lose a regular season game. It would have to be a championship or playoff series that they lost.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri or Tennessee is going to take them down. The likelihood, Joe, of Georgia going undefeated again in the regular season is not likely, because it doesn't ever really happen that you have 3 straight regular seasons where that happens. Look, we've seen dynasties in college athletics. We've seen them all. You know what we haven't seen? A team not lose a regular season game for 3 straight years in the modern era. I'm not talking about Nebraska and all the – I'm talking about in the modern era. We have not really seen that happen. I think Missouri or Tennessee knocks them off. I'm leaning Tennessee to knock them off. So doesn't mean that I still think Tennessee could lose 2 games, okay, because I think that there's teams out there. I just think that they're not as deep as some would believe. They lost their center for a little while. Let's see, Caden Mays. But somebody's going to knock off Georgia. I don't know who it's going to be, but somebody's going to do it. It might even be Ole Miss.
I don't disagree with this because it's a really good point. I feel like and we saw this last year, if Georgia's going to lose, it's probably not going to be one of their premier opponents. And also any loss that they have is going to be an upset. You know, the best team in the country.
Any loss that they have, Joe, this year is an upset in the regular season.
I don't think that Tennessee is the game, though. I think what you said, it's like Missouri or Ole Miss, a game that is a foregone conclusion. And again, we saw this happen last year where they toyed around a little bit too much with Missouri and it was close and they ended up pulling out and winning that game. I think it's certainly very, very possible that this upcoming season, I agree with you. I don't think it's very likely that they go undefeated again. It is such a difficult thing to go undefeated that many times in a row. That is a massive, significant record that they would be chasing, which I believe is Oklahoma has the current record for most consecutive victories. It's like 50 something. Right. I think that they're a great program, but to achieve that is almost impossible in modern college football. I do think, though, if that does happen, it's a Missouri or it's like an Ole Miss, like you said.
Definitely could happen. What about you? What's one for you?
I think that mine is one that's you're going to disagree with. So you're very high on Penn State, and I think Penn State's going to be a really good football team this year. But they face off with a team not named Michigan, not named Ohio State earlier on in the season. That being having to travel to play at Illinois. And I have noticed so much disrespect for Illinois this entire preseason. They just named Luke Altmaier their new starting quarterback. He comes from the SEC. They have a pretty strong offensive line, but most importantly, Their defense is really freaking good, and their defensive line has a bunch of NFL defensive linemen on that defensive line. I would not be shocked, like we saw almost happen last year, where Michigan couldn't run the ball against Illinois and they almost lost to them. I am willing to put my name on the line here that I think that Illinois can pull off the upset and beat Penn State.
Just how far down the rabbit hole have you gone since Brett Bielema quote tweeted you? Is that what this is all about?
I have always he quote tweeted me because I was in on them before he quote tweeted me. That is why. It wasn't because he didn't quote tweet me and I suddenly started being in on Illinois. I have been on Illinois the entire time.
Joe, that ain't happening. It's not happening.
They almost beat Michigan last year.
This isn't last year.
Yeah, they didn't lose much. They lost one defensive. Okay, they lost a couple guys in their secondary, but they lost their best defensive player last year, and they bring back
Joe. Penn State
even better
upgraded. They upgraded at quarterback, and then key pieces returned. They got better.
Has just as much experience as McCarthy did last year, and McCarthy was a liability against them.
Darren says Penn State going down like a. My goodness.
I don't know who should read that.
Look.
Okay.
I don't. They are really talented. I don't trust Bielema. I just don't. I mean, because when I look at them, I don't know if the game is close that Bielema can coach them to a win. Like, okay, cool. He was good at Wisconsin. Okay,
but
cool.
Does James Franklin have a track record of
like beating Ohio State in a close game?
He's got like one premier
Brett
win on
Bielema hasn't. Name one Brett Bielema has.
He hasn't been in a lot of premier programs.
He was at Wisconsin. He was in he was in the
He was
SEC.
great. Is Arkansas like a blue blood? I don't.
Arkansas was beating LSU and Bama, dude. Like LSU lost to Arkansas the year they won a national title. They had multiple years where they were having 10-win seasons. In comes big ass belly button Brett Bielema. Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
They were really good. He was really good when he was at Wisconsin, though, and then he jumped for Arkansas.
And then they sucked.
This isn't Arkansas. This is Illinois. He's got a damn good defensive line. What's your second one?
God, I hate myself for saying this.
Say it.
I think Texas A&M takes down either Alabama or Tennessee.
I probably could have guessed that you were going to come here with.
They're going to take one of them. They're going to take one of them down.
I think if it's one of them, it's Tennessee.
That's the one that I picked right here.
I don't think that they do it to Alabama just because Nick's got Jimbo's phone number, man. Like he's got him figured out. He has never been able to get past him.
Jimbo?
But
Jimbo was
he has beaten him. I know that. I know that. I'm covering my ass here. But it feels like Nick will not let that happen.
I mean, as bad as A&M was a year ago,
mm-hmm.
I mean, they still almost beat him. Well, Blake, it's last year. Well, Jalen Milroe played in that game.
That's a good point.
They could take Alabama at home.
Mm-hmm. I don't think this is unrealistic because, like, you need everything to be firing on all cylinders. You need everything to be moving in the right direction.
Just talented. I mean, let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Name the position groups that Texas A&M is worse in.
Running back, offensive line.
They got 2 5-star running backs. Dude, Le'Veon Moss and who was the kid? Reuben Owens.
That's a good point.
Got, not A-Chain. Who's returning?
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name is escaping me.
God dog it. but they have production returning. Joe, here's another thing that we don't talk about. Dude, I know I made a joke about their wide receiver room sucking, okay, and it backfired because I was just trying to make a joke. They might have the second or third best wide receiver group, not only in the SEC, you could put their wide receiver group in the top 5 in the country. Like, buddy, we start going down this list now. We start going down this list.
I just think that the problem is why I'm not, again, I've never been fully in on Texas A&M is, yes, they have the ceiling to be a top 10 team, but
they never had this kind of talent though, buddy.
It's a lot of young, undeveloped talent. So it's like Miami has a lot of young, undeveloped talent. So it's a kind of that same, there's two sides of the coin. Are you top 10 or are you Miami?
Let me ask you this question. Would you rather Connor Weigman or Jalen Milroe?
Connor Weigman.
Would you rather Petrino or would you rather Tommy Reese?
Petrino, it's a good point.
So again, we start talking about if A&M has had a track record even with bad offenses, okay, scoring points and keeping that game close, and then they beat him at home a couple years ago, man.
You know what? For one of the first times ever, you've talked me into this. You've talked me into this. I can see it.
It could happen. Now they go to Rocky Top the next week, or let me make sure that.
Are they back to back? They can't do both.
They're back to back. So in the next week, they go to Knoxville, and they're going to go 1-1 in that stretch. And you know what's going to happen? I also think that they go to Miami and win. Okay. And then you start getting to a place, Joe. Think about this. If they do beat Miami and they do beat Alabama, Joe, they're going to be in the top 5.
Well, so what I was going to say is I think what's possible here is that one of these upsets is pulled out and then they only finish with 8 wins. Like, I think that is
that
I can feel that
game. You're correct. The Tennessee game is where they could start losing things. That they have arguably the most brutal stretch in the SEC to some extent. They got Alabama at home. They go to Tennessee. They got South Carolina at home. They have a bye week. Then they go to Ole Miss, then Mississippi State. They have ACU. I guess it's Abilene Christian. And then they have LSU on the road. They arguably have one of the more brutal schedules after that Alabama game. But if they're able to take down Miami and they're able to take down Alabama, they go into Knoxville undefeated. Buddy, we're having a whole different conversation about them. A whole different. If they do that and they go into Knoxville undefeated, a lot of people are going to say A&M has a chance because they still arguably may have the best passing defense in the country. They have really good defensive line units. If they're undefeated going into Knoxville, we have you can make the argument outside of LSU, Alabama, Georgia, that would be the premier SEC game in the country. Like that would of the season, maybe. Not named the big boys. All right.
That also wouldn't be an upset then if they beat Tennessee.
Well, at that point, Tennessee would probably also be undefeated. So you have a collision course. Let's see if that happens. Let's just see if that happens.
It's possible.
All right.
My second one.
Who's your second one?
I'm not pitching that this. I'm not saying that this is 1,000% going to happen. This is not like the Illinois pick, but I think that this is kind of a cliche pick. This is one that could happen in week 1. Duke plays Clemson week 1. Duke is a sneaky, unexpectedly good team. Mike Elko is a really good head coach. We've already seen he's been a really good coordinator throughout his time in the SEC at Notre Dame. He landed in a perfect position at a school that fits where he can coach best. Riley Leonard, their starting quarterback, is really freaking good. And if you talk to the right people, they will tell you that he is undervalued and he is one of the most under-talked about quarterbacks in all of college football. Great athlete, good arm. They also have a bunch of they've got a really good offensive line. They've got a bunch of good defensive pieces. I am saying that this is possible because Clemson could show up, overlook their opponent, be looking on to the next week. Cade Klubnik's still getting a little bit used to the offense. they're thinking that this is a warm-up game, and it's really not because Duke's a tough-ass opponent. I think that this is one that needs to be considered of possibly happening.
A trap game.
Fully committing. Yeah, it's a trap
game.
I'm not fully committing to it, but I think it's possible.